Repeats her story over and over. Antoinette, I can't possibly know what's in another person's mind.
August 16, 1977. 2 phone calls, 20 minutes apart. One begging for prayers. One confirming the nightmare that would fracture a family forever. I've carried the weight of that day in silence, but silence protects the wrong people, and I'm done protecting the wrong people. That afternoon, I was home with my 2 little boys, just a normal Tuesday. The phone rang and it was my mother, but I couldn't understand her. She was crying so hard the words barely came through. Sobbing, gasping for air between words, and all she could say was, "Pray for Elvis, pray for Elvis. He needs our prayers." I didn't ask why. I didn't ask what happened. When someone tells you to pray like that, when you hear that kind of desperation in their voice, you don't waste time with questions. I hung up the phone, gathered my boys, and we sat down right there on the living room floor. And I prayed. I didn't know what I was praying for. I just knew Elvis needed us. We grew up in a faith-based family. Prayer wasn't just something we did on Sundays. It was how we survived, how we protected each other. And in that moment, I believed with everything in me that prayer could make a difference. 20 minutes later, the phone rang again. "It's too late, honey. He's gone, he's gone. Come to Graceland immediately." Those words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense because Elvis wasn't just my cousin. He wasn't just the biggest star in the world. He was the center of gravity for our entire family. He was the sun we all orbited around. And when the sun goes out, everything goes dark. I found a babysitter for my kids. I drove to Graceland. And when I walked through those gates, it was like walking into a black hole. No light, no air, just chaos and grief and this overwhelming sense that everything was about to change in ways we couldn't even begin to understand yet. People were everywhere, crying, screaming, collapsing. The Memphis Mafia, the family, the staff, reporters already gathering outside the gates like vultures. And in the middle of all that chaos, I remember thinking something that haunted me for years afterward. I remember thinking, we're going to lose more than Elvis today. I didn't know how right I was. Because here's what nobody tells you about the day a legend dies. The grief is real, the shock is real, but so is everything else that comes flooding in behind it. The questions, the suspicions, the people positioning themselves, the sudden awareness that when someone that powerful, that wealthy, that famous dies, there's going to be a fight over what's left behind. And I'm not just talking about money. Within hours, things started disappearing. Elvis's jewelry, pieces he wore on stage, pieces that meant something to him, personal items that should have been protected, preserved, cataloged, just gone, vanished in the chaos of that first day and the days that followed. To this day, we don't know who took it all. We don't know what happened to it. Some of it probably ended up sold to collectors. Some of it is probably sitting in someone's private collection right now, pieces of Elvis that were stolen while his body was still warm. But the missing jewelry was just the beginning of what would be taken from this family. I worked in the office at Graceland. I lived on the property with my family. We'd moved there when Elvis sold the Circle G Ranch in 1969, and he moved us all up into a house right behind Graceland. I was there every single day. I saw how things worked. I saw who Elvis trusted. I saw how he ran his world, how he took care of his family, how he tried to balance being Elvis Presley the legend with being Elvis the man who just wanted to be home with the people he loved. And I saw what happened when he was gone. The family scattered. And I don't just mean physically, though that happened too. I mean we were pushed aside, separated. The Presleys who raised Elvis, who knew him before he was Elvis, who loved him when he was just a boy from Tupelo with a dream, we became inconvenient. We became the old guard. We became people who knew too much about the real story. Because once Elvis died, there was a new story being written. A carefully managed story. A story where certain people got to be the heroes, the keepers of the legacy, the authorities on who Elvis really was. And the rest of us, we were expected to fade into the background, to be grateful for whatever scraps we were thrown, to keep our mouths shut about anything that didn't fit the narrative. I kept my mouth shut for a long time. I raised my sons. I worked different jobs. I sold Mary Kay. I ran a funeral home, which now seems like the darkest kind of irony. I lived my life. I stayed quiet. But staying quiet doesn't make the truth go away. It just lets lies take root and grow until they're so big, so established, that people mistake them for truth. And the biggest lie? That everyone who loved Elvis got to be part of preserving his memory. That everyone who knew him got a voice in telling his story. That his daughter grew up surrounded by the love and family that Elvis would have wanted for her. None of that is true. Lisa Marie was 9 years old when her father died. 9 years old. And in the chaos and grief and power struggle that followed, that little girl got lost. She got separated from the family that could have taught her who her daddy really was. Not Elvis the legend. Elvis the man. The boy who grew up poor but faithful. The son who loved his mama more than anything. The cousin who never forgot where he came from, no matter how famous he got. We could have given her that. We wanted to give her that, but we never got the chance. And now I'm the only one left to tell you why. Priscilla tells her story over and over. The same story. The same version. The same carefully crafted narrative about young love and Hollywood glamour and the woman who stood by Elvis Presley. She's told it in interviews, in books, in documentaries. She's told it so many times that people don't even question it anymore. It's just accepted as the truth. But here's what I want to know. Who decided that her story was the only story worth telling? When Priscilla first came to Graceland, she was young, beautiful, absolutely stunning, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Elvis was strikingly handsome and she was strikingly beautiful. They looked like they belonged in a movie together. And as she grew up, she became even more beautiful. During the years they were married, yes, she was gorgeous. That's not up for debate. But beauty and truth aren't the same thing. I watched Priscilla navigate life at Graceland. I saw how she adapted, how she learned to be Mrs. Elvis Presley. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you she didn't care about him, because I think she did. In her way. For a time. But what I also saw was someone who understood very early on that being connected to Elvis Presley was the most valuable thing she'd ever have. And she's done quite well for herself with that connection, hasn't she? The Presley name. She kept it after the divorce. She built an empire on it. And again, I can't get inside another person's mind. I can't tell you what her motivations were or are. But I can tell you what I've watched happen over the last 47 years. I've watched one person control the narrative while the rest of us were pushed further and further into the shadows. When that Elvis movie came out in 2022, I sat in that theater and I felt sick. Not because of Austin Butler, he did a fine job. Not because of the music or the spectacle, but because of how they portrayed Vernon. How they portrayed Gladys. How they took the people who made Elvis who he was and turned them into cartoon characters. Vernon Presley was not a weak man. He was not some bumbling fool who only cared about money. That man was strong. He was strong-willed. He protected Elvis as fiercely as any father has ever protected a son. Yes, he worried about money, but not because he was greedy. He worried because he watched people line up to take advantage of Elvis. He watched vultures circle his son every single day. And when he tried to protect Elvis from that, when he tried to make sure people weren't stealing from him or using him, he and Elvis would have words about it. But that's what family does. You argue, you disagree, you say hard things, and then you laugh it off and you move on because you know it all comes from love. Elvis knew his daddy had his best interests at heart. He knew Vernon loved him more than life itself. But that's not the Vernon you saw in that movie, is it? And Gladys, sweet, faithful Gladys who raised that boy to love God and love family and never forget where he came from. They didn't do her justice either. Now, I don't know who consulted on that film. I don't know who gave their blessing to those portrayals. But I know that Elvis would have been devastated. He would have been hurt beyond measure to see his parents depicted that way. To see his mama and daddy reduced to caricatures in a movie that was supposed to honor his legacy. But here's the thing about controlling the narrative. You get to decide which parts of the story get told. You get to decide who looks good and who doesn't. You get to decide which voices matter and which ones should stay silent. The Smiths went their own direction after Elvis died. The Presleys scattered. We all went different ways, pursued different lives. And honestly, I think that's exactly what someone wanted. Because family members who were there, who saw everything, who knew the real story, were inconvenient to a carefully managed brand. Every time Priscilla repeats her version of events, she's not just telling her story. She's erasing someone else's. Every interview where she's presented as the ultimate authority on Elvis Presley is an interview where Vernon's truth doesn't matter, where Gladys's memory gets rewritten, where those of us who knew Elvis before he was Elvis become footnotes. And the most heartbreaking part of all of this, while Priscilla was building her empire on the Presley name, while she was doing interviews and managing Graceland and becoming the face of Elvis's legacy, his daughter was struggling. Lisa Marie felt alone. She felt unloved. She said so herself in the years before she died. Think about that. Elvis Presley's daughter, surrounded by wealth and fame and people who claimed to adore her father, felt alone and unloved. How does that happen? I'll tell you how. It happens when a child gets separated from the family that could have shown her who her daddy really was. It happens when keepers of the legacy forget that the legacy isn't just about money and museums and movie deals. It's about values. It's about faith. It's about the way Elvis treated people, the way he loved people, the way he never forgot that he was a boy from Tupelo who got blessed beyond measure. Lisa Marie needed to know that Elvis. She needed to know the man who grew up with nothing but had everything that mattered, family and faith and love. She needed to spend time in Memphis with the people who raised him, who shaped him, who could have taught her the values he grew up with. She needed us, and we would have welcomed her with open arms. We would have brought her into our homes, shared our memories, shown her the Elvis that the world never got to see, the real man behind the legend. But that never happened. So I have to ask, if you're the keeper of Elvis Presley's memory, if you're the guardian of his legacy, if you're the one telling his story over and over and over, why did his daughter die feeling abandoned by everyone who claimed to love him? Who made the decision to keep Lisa Marie away from the family that could have saved her? And why has nobody ever had to answer for that? Lisa Marie Presley was 9 years old when her world ended. 9 years old when she lost the one person who loved her completely, unconditionally, with every fiber of his being. And in the chaos that followed August 16, 1977, something else was lost too. Something that could have changed everything. She was lost to us. And I have to live with that. We all have to live with that because I failed her. The entire Presley family failed her. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that for sympathy or to ease my own conscience. I say it because it's the truth, and somebody needs to finally tell the truth about what happened to that little girl. Elvis adored Lisa Marie. She was the absolute love of his life. When she was at Graceland, that little girl lit up every room she walked into, and he would drop everything just to be with her, to make her laugh, to make sure she knew how precious she was. The way he looked at her, the way his whole face changed when she was around, you could see it. That was pure love. That was a daddy who would have done anything, sacrificed anything for his baby girl. And she loved him the same way, completely, totally, with the kind of love that only exists between a parent and child when everything is right in the world. But then he was gone, and everything that should have happened next, everything Elvis would have wanted for her, none of it happened. Here's what should have happened. Lisa Marie should have been surrounded by family. Not just any family, but the Presleys, the people who raised Elvis, the people who taught him about faith and values and what really matters in this life. She should have spent summers in Memphis learning about her grandmother Gladys, hearing stories about what Elvis was like as a boy, understanding where all that talent and drive and kindness came from. She should have known Vernon's strength, not the weak caricature that the movies show, but the real man, strong-willed, protective, a man who worked hard and loved hard and never forgot what it meant to struggle. She should have learned that her grandfather wasn't some money-grubbing fool. He was a father who watched the world try to devour his son and fought every day to protect him. She should have grown up knowing that Elvis didn't just appear fully formed as a superstar. He came from somewhere. He came from people. He came from a family that believed in God and taking care of each other and staying true to who you are no matter how famous you get. We could have taught her all of that. We wanted to teach her all of that. But instead, she grew up in California, disconnected from her roots, surrounded by Hollywood and wealth and people who saw her as Elvis Presley's daughter instead of just Lisa. A little girl who needed to know where she came from. A little girl who needed family, real family, the kind that doesn't care about your last name or your inheritance. The kind that just loves you because you're blood. I think about the life she could have had, coming to Memphis, spending time with us, hearing the stories, learning the values, understanding that the Presley family wasn't about fame or money. It was about faith. It was about sticking together. It was about knowing that no matter what happened in the world, you had people who loved you just for being you. That's what Elvis grew up with. That's what made him who he was. And that's exactly what Lisa Marie needed after he died. But she never got it. And the result, she struggled her entire life. Failed marriages, addiction, that desperate search for love and stability that she never quite found. And underneath it all, that feeling of being alone, of being unloved. She said it herself. Elvis Presley's daughter felt alone and unloved. Do you understand how devastating that is? Do you understand how preventable it was? There's a pattern in the Presley family. The men die young. Elvis was 42. His stillborn brother Jesse would have been 42. That tragedy runs deep in our bloodline. And Lisa Marie, she got caught in that same cycle. The addiction, the pain, the feeling that something was always missing, always just out of reach. But it didn't have to be that way. If she'd known us, if she'd been allowed to be part of the family that raised her father, maybe things would have been different. Maybe she would have had that foundation, that sense of belonging, that understanding of who she really was beyond being Elvis's daughter. Maybe she would have had people to call when things got hard. People who loved her not because of what she represented, but because she was family. We would have opened our doors to her. We would have opened our hearts to her. We would have done anything to make sure she knew she wasn't alone, that she was loved, that she had a whole family in Memphis who remembered her daddy when he was just a boy with a dream and a guitar, and who would have loved her just as fiercely. But nobody asked us. Nobody thought we mattered. The family that made Elvis who he was, the people who knew him before the world knew him, we were cut out of Lisa Marie's life like we were nothing. Who made that decision? Who decided that a grieving 9-year-old girl didn't need her father's family? Who decided that California and Hollywood and the carefully managed Elvis brand were more important than giving that child the roots and values and unconditional love that Elvis grew up with? I've asked myself these questions for decades, and I still don't have answers. What I do have is regret. Deep, aching regret that I didn't fight harder, that I didn't reach out more, that I didn't somehow break through whatever walls were put up between us and make sure Lisa Marie knew we were here, that we loved her, that she wasn't alone. She died feeling alone. She died not knowing how many of us would have done anything to be part of her life. How many of us would have welcomed her with open arms, no questions asked, no conditions attached. And I have to live with that. We all have to live with that. But I also have to ask, who made that decision for her? Who kept her away from us? And why has nobody ever been held accountable for the damage that did? I'm the last one left. Let that sink in for a moment. From my immediate family, the people who lived this story with me, who were there through everything, I'm the only one still standing. And that's not something I say lightly. It's not something I'm proud of or happy about. It's just the reality I wake up to every single day. My mother, my father, my sister, my brothers, all gone. And beyond my immediate family, the list gets longer and more painful. Elvis, Uncle Vernon, Grandma Minnie-Me, Aunt Delta. One by one, they've all passed on. And with each loss, a little more of the real story disappears. Because here's the thing about memory. It dies with the people who carry it. When someone passes away who lived through something, who witnessed something, who knew the truth about something, that truth becomes a little harder to prove. A little easier to dispute. A little more vulnerable to being rewritten by whoever's left standing with the loudest voice and the biggest platform. And I've watched that happen with Elvis's story for 47 years now. I've watched the narrative get shaped and controlled and packaged for public consumption. I've watched certain voices get amplified while others get silenced. I've watched the family that raised Elvis, that made him who he was, get pushed further and further into the background until we're barely footnotes in our own family's history. And I stayed quiet through most of it. I raised my sons. I built my own life. I worked my jobs, lived in my house, stayed in my lane. Because that's what you do, right? You don't make waves. You don't speak ill of people. You don't air family business to the world. You keep your head down and you let time pass, and you hope that somehow, someday, the truth matters more than the carefully managed version of events. But time doesn't fix things. Time just makes lies more comfortable. Time just makes people forget there was ever another side to the story. And now I'm looking at the calendar and I'm doing the math and I'm realizing something that terrifies me. If I don't speak up now, the truth dies with me. All of it. Everything I witnessed. Everything I know. Everything that contradicts the official narrative about who Elvis was and how his family was treated and what really happened to Lisa Marie. Gone forever. And I can't let that happen. This isn't about revenge. I want to make that crystal clear. This isn't about destroying anyone or settling old scores or getting back at people who wronged me. I'm too old and too tired for that kind of pettiness. And honestly, the people I'd want to hold accountable, most of them are gone now anyway. This is about responsibility. The responsibility of being the last witness standing. The responsibility of carrying memories that matter, that need to be preserved, that deserve to be heard before they're lost forever. Elvis deserves to have his full story told. Not just the parts that make for good movie scenes or documentaries. Not just the romance and the fame and the tragedy, but the real man, the boy from Tupelo who loved his mama and never forgot where he came from, the son who adored his parents and would be devastated to see how they've been portrayed, the cousin who took care of his family and made sure we were provided for, the father who absolutely worshipped his little girl. Vernon deserves better than being remembered as a weak, money-hungry fool. He was strong. He was protective. He loved his son with a fierceness that the world never fully understood. Gladys deserves better than being reduced to an overprotective mother stereotype. She was faithful. She was loving. She instilled values in Elvis that he carried his entire life. And Lisa Marie. God, Lisa Marie deserves so much better than the tragedy her life became. She deserved to know her father's family. She deserved to grow up with the values and faith and unconditional love that made Elvis who he was. She deserved to feel connected to something bigger than Hollywood and fame and the weight of a legendary last name. She deserved to know she wasn't alone. And the fact that she died feeling alone and unloved when she had family members who would have given anything to be part of her life, that's not just sad. That's not just unfortunate. That's a betrayal, and somebody needs to say it. So that's why I'm speaking up now. That's why I'm telling these stories, answering these questions, sharing these memories that some people would probably prefer stayed buried. Because I'm the last one left who can do it. I'm the last one who was there, who lived it, who knows what really happened behind Graceland's gates and in the years that followed Elvis's death. This isn't about tearing anyone down. It's about lifting up the voices that have been silenced for too long. It's about making sure that when people talk about Elvis Presley, they remember that he came from somewhere. He came from people with real stories who loved him before the world knew his name. The real Elvis legacy isn't in Graceland's museum displays. It isn't in the movies or the impersonators or the merchandise. It's in the values he grew up with, the faith he carried, the way he treated people, the love he had for his family. That's the legacy that matters. That's the legacy that could have saved Lisa Marie if anyone had bothered to share it with her. And that's the legacy I'm fighting to preserve before it's too late. Because once I'm gone, that's it. The last living witness from the inner circle is gone, and then there's nothing left but the official story, the managed narrative, the version that serves certain interests and protects certain reputations. I won't let that happen, not without a fight, not without making sure the full truth is out there for anyone who wants to hear it. Don't let one version of history erase everyone else who lived it. Don't let the loudest voice be the only voice. And don't let the real Elvis Presley, the man his family knew and loved, disappear into myth and carefully crafted storytelling. He was real, we were real, this family was real, and our story deserves to be told. If this story matters to you, if you believe the full truth deserves to be heard, subscribe to this channel. Share this video with people who love Elvis and want to know the real story. Leave your questions in the comments because I'm still here, I'm still talking, and I'm not stopping until every truth I carry is out in the open. Time is running out. Let's make sure these voices aren't forgotten.